Good day. I'm Marcus Garcia, Arizona State University writing mentor. Today we're going to talk about layout sins. This is for your work in education or any other of the multimodal elements that you may incorporate in this class or future classes is to help you look the most professional in your work. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. 13 amateur layout errors. Number 1, centering everything. In general, avoid centered layouts. Number 2, warped or naked photos. Keep photographs proportionate and use hairline rules to border photos that have ambiguous edges. Number 3, too many fonts. Try to stick up to 2 per layout. Number 4, bulky borders and boxes. Use negative space to group or separate things. If you must use a border or box, choose an understated one. Number 5, cheated or missing margins. Be generous with margins, including inset and offset for text and picture boxes. Number 6, stair-stepping. Keep headlines in a straight line. Number 7, four corners and clutter. Clutter is bad. Clustering is good. Number 8, trapped negative space. Push extra negative space to the outside edges of your layout. Number 9, busy backgrounds. Design backgrounds as negative space. Save tiling for the bathroom. Number 10, tacky type emphasis. Think twice about reversing, stroking, using all caps, or underlining. Number 11, bad bullets. Use real bullets for lists and use hanging indents to properly align lists. Number 12, windows and orphans. Avoid inelegant breaks at the bottom and tops of legs of type. Number 13, justified rivers. Avoid unsightly rivers of negative space flowing through legs of justified type. So regarding layout sins, there is a host of them. For you, we've narrowed the list to a baker's dozen, the most conspicuous errors we see in amateur work. Making any of these mistakes pretty much advertises that you don't know what you're doing. Until spotting these sins in others' works fills you with pity, keep this checklist handy. Number 1, so we're going to cover centering everything. Amateurs tend to center everything. Visual, headline, body, copy, tags, everything's centered smack dab in the middle of the layout. Admit it, that's your first instinct. Centering feels safe because it results in a visual yawn. While centered content can communicate traditional, formal, or conservative, it also creates visual flow issues. Left or right aligned layouts give the viewer's eye a nice straight vertical line on the right or the left to follow top to bottom. Centered layouts have no such line. The eye bounces around in search of the next eye entry point. Centering is a composition issue, meaning how you compose or arrange items on the layout. By the way, sins 7, 8, and 9 are composition issues too. Number 2, warped or naked photos. Warped photos. The size of your photo doesn't fit your layout. So on your computer screen, you drag the picture's edges around till you make it fit. Bad idea. Now you have a new problem, a warped photo. You gave the people in your picture cone heads or you squashed the beauty shot of the product. You must resize pictures in proportion to their original size. For example, if you reduce the height of a photo to 50%, then you must also reduce the width of the photo to 50%. Likewise, if you double the size of a picture's width, then you must double its height. Just look at your picture. If people and objects in your pictures don't look like that in real life, then your picture is warped. To resize a photo the proper way, you have choices. For a too big picture, reduce its size proportionally to fit the layout as best as it can and crop the excess. Crop means to cut. For a too small picture, enlarge it proportionally to fit the layout as best as it can before cropping the excess. Naked photos. This sin applies to photography only, and we're not talking about nudes here. A naked photo is a photograph that needs a border. Not all photos need borders, but some do. If you can't tell where the photo begins or ends because the photo color blends with the color of the screen or paper, then the photo needs a border to mark its edges. If one photo of your layout needs a border, then give all your photos the same border to be consistent. When a photo border is necessary, use a hairline rule as a thin or a strand of hair, or change the background color outside the photo to contrast the edges of the photo. The idea is to subtly mark the photo's edges without distracting from the photo. You want the viewer to think, cool photo, not, whoa, check out that bulky border. Number 3, too many fonts. Fonts have tremendous communicative power, and not just because they're used to spell out words. The right fonts bring character, color, texture, and pattern to layouts, which means they must be chosen carefully and with purpose. It also means you don't want to put too many in the same layout. Too many fonts, especially too many fancy decorative fonts, become the layout equivalent of pairing a loud stripe with an equally loud plat. You get visual overload and clutter. The best practice for choosing fonts is to select one that is fairly generic and readable. Think Times Roman for print or Helvetica for screen. But don't use either one because they are both default fonts and have been used to death. Use your generic font for your reading copy and then choose a second font that contrasts for use in headlines or subheads. The second font can be bigger, bolder, or italic version of your generic font, or it could be something completely different. Bottom line, try to limit yourself to 2 fonts per layout. We're briefly going to talk about 5 steps to visual success. 1. Establish a clear focal point. A properly proportioned photo and large contrasting headline provide a clear eye entry point for this design's layout. Number 2. Minimize the number of groupings the eye must scan. Cluster like with like and make negative space work, but not against flow. Instead of 4 corners and cluster all over the page, this layout clusters everything into 4 key groupings: photo, headline, bullet lists, body copy, and tags. 3. Guide the eye with visual sightlines. Strong verticals form left-aligned copy blocks, and tags give the eye a clear visual path to follow. 4. Set type properly. This design limits all caps to a large one-word headline. Choosing a single font family for type readability creates visual unity through similarity. Other type settings, details such as proper bullets, are spot on. No tacky type here. Number 5. Use simplicity and restraint. Back to our sins. Number 4. Bulky borders and boxes. Bulky borders and boxes are sins too. Beginners tend to go border and box crazy in their layouts, mostly because they worry about visually separating layout items. Borders and boxes are like fences. They communicate stop. You have to ask yourself what you're fencing in or out. Chunky borders and boxes are worse because they call attention to themselves. Usually you want to call attention to what's inside the border and not the border itself. If you need to border a box, think barely there, think lingerie straps. Even better, think twice before using a border or box at all. Negative space can do the same separating job, only without the showboating and claustrophobic effect. Number 5. Cheated or missing margins. In situations when you must have a border or box, you have to start all over again with margins inside a border or box. If the general rule says don't cheat your margins, then whenever you make a new box, even if the new box is an entire screen, page, or layout, you must make new margins. Collateral and news design, for example, employ boxes for related sidebars, breakouts, and pull quotes, etc. So do web pages, totally comprised of grids of boxes. All those boxes require a set of margins. Margins inside the text box are called inset. Margins outside the text box or picture box are referred to as offset. You need a bit of offset, for example, on the outside of a photo to keep its cut line from butting up against the photo's edges. Without inset and offset, your type will squish up against the box inside and out. This not only looks bad, but cuts down on readability. Don't be stingy with your margins, wherever they appear. Train your eyes to spot areas where margins of negative space have been cheated. Remember, white space is not your enemy. Number 6. Stair-stepping. This is another sin we attribute to the beginner's pathological fear of white space. Instead of listing text, words, or phrases, or visuals in neat vertical or horizontal row, beginners will try to fill the space by stair-stepping their chosen elements down the page. And there's an example here that breaks the text up into three different lines that stair-step down the page. And it's very unnerving as you read it because the words are all over the place. These are a few things that kill readability and flow more than that stair-stepping. Align your elements vertically or horizontally and let the remaining white space do what it does best. Frame and highlight your important content. Number 7. 4 corners and clutter. After centering, the other beginner's temptation is to fill up all 4 corners of the layout, along with every other available bit of space. This results in a cluttered, thus unappealing and confusing visual message. White space is not your enemy. Think of the Zen of good design as a balance between the yin and yang of negative space and positive space. Good layout requires calming pools of negative space that help guide the viewer's eye through the flow of the design. Rather than spreading out your layout's content to fill every corner, group items together that belong together. That advice is worth repeating. Group visual information together that belongs together. Call this the clustering effect. Clustering results in fewer groupings of visual positive space. Take tags, for example. Tags visually group the logo, theme line, URL, address, and phone all together in one visual block, not 5. Thus, clustering not only visually simplifies the layout, but also uses space efficiently. Clustering is good, clutter is bad. Number 8. Trapped negative space. Another composition rule encourages you to push negative space towards the outside edges of your layout. Trapped space is a puddle of negative space landlocked inside the layout. It's like a bubble that can't escape. Because it creates a big blob in the middle of your layout, trap space can draw attention away from your other layout items. To prevent this, make sure your white space opens out to the layout's margins. Number 9. Busy backgrounds. Speaking of negative space, remember the whole point of it is to balance the busyness of positive space visuals and type. So why do some folks tile their weak websites with eyeball-stabbing backgrounds busy enough to induce psychosis? About backgrounds, whether digital or print, have mercy on your design and your audience. White space is not your enemy. Don't turn your calming negative space background into busy, cluttered positive space that competes with your visuals and type. Backgrounds shouldn't interfere with your visual communication. Backgrounds shouldn't blink either, by the way. Here they show a picture of Greenwise Lawn Care with a whole bunch of mowers and things very busy. It's very distracting. It interferes with the type. And that's kind of an example of what not to do. Number 10, tacky type emphasis, reversing, stroking, using all caps and underlining. The sin of tacky type emphasis refers to a quartet of risky behaviors. Reversing, stroking, using all caps and underlining. Think twice before you do any of these things and never do all 4 at once. Reversing. Some say never ever reverse type. Others say judicious use of reverse can add impact. The controversy stems from a couple things. First, because we grew up reading dark words on light backgrounds, we're used to reading that way. We find it easier to read dark copy on a light field, thus reading a lot of reverse copy may reduce readability or tire the eye. If your job is to communicate a great deal of textual information, then you don't want to reduce your type's readability or tire readers' eyes. Second, too often beginners reverse type by using fonts that have both thick and thin lines. In font lingo, hairline strokes refer to the thin lines. Stem strokes refer to the thick ones. Not all fonts have thicker and thinner parts, but many do. If you reverse a font with very thin hairline strokes, you may create a production problem. Once printed, the hairline strokes of reverse letters may disappear. This is because paper is absorbent, and reversing floods of a great deal of wet ink onto the page to create a dark background. As the paper soaks up the ink, the thin parts of reverse characters may gain or absorb more dark color than you intend. Then you really have a readability problem because the characters, thus the words, will be muddy and illegible. But the phenomenon of thin hairline strokes disappearing also occurs on electronic screens. In sum, don't reverse type unless you have a good reason in a very short copy situation. If you do reverse type, choose a font with sufficiently thick letter forms to maintain legibility. To clarify, this is putting a light font on a dark background. That's what reversing means. Stroking. Stroke type is when the side characters called glyphs have been outlined. Amateurs do it because they can, or because they think it looks neato or helps make an important word stand out. In truth, it distorts glyph proportions and obscures original hairline strokes. It's like outlining the Mona Lisa with a big fat whiteboard marker. There are probably better ways to get people's attention. All caps. Imagine yourself driving down an unfamiliar roadway. In the distance, you see a road sign. You're not close enough to make out individual letters in the words, but you can tell what the sign says because of the shapes of the words. People read words, not letters. But when you capitalize words, they lose their shapes. The reason words have recognizable shapes is because of ascending and descending letters. Ascenders are tall lowercase glyphs that go up, B, D, F, H, K, L, T. Descenders are glyphs with tails that descend below the baseline of the word, G, J, P, Q, and Y. Ascenders and descenders give words their shapes. Type in all caps has no ascenders and descenders, and so requires the reader to do a little extra decoding. If you want to use all caps, make sure they don't interfere with your visual communication purpose, and don't even think about using all caps for body copy. Underlining. Last, never underline type to emphasize it. The only correct time to underline text is to communicate a live hyperlink. There are better ways to accentuate type than reversing, stroking, using all caps, or underlining. In a headline, use a large point size and intersecting font for impact. In body copy, emphasize important words with contrasting font or use italics. In fact, the uninformed often emphasize type by committing multiple tacky type sins at once. Then to make a bad situation worse, they add 3 exclamation points. If an exclamation point is warranted, 1 is always enough. Number 11, bad bullets. The sin of bad bullets refers to 2 issues: using the wrong kinds of bullets for lists, improperly aligning bullet lists. Simple but elegant dots or numerals are almost always a good choice. Asterisks, hyphens, and smiley faces are not. For decorative bullets, match their tone to your design. Avoid cheese. That takes care of first bad bullets issue. The second bad bullets issue has to do with proper alignments. Bulletized lists require hanging indents in which the bullets or numerals line up together in the margin. Then the type all hangs together too in a separate vertical line. Align bullets with bullets vertically. Align type with type vertically. Number 12. Widows and orphans. The terminology for widows and orphans is unfortunate. The typographic problem they refer to are as well. A typographic widow refers to a few lonely words or hyphenated words stranded at the bottom of a column or leg of type. An orphan refers to a few lonely words stranded at the top of a leg. If you can't remember the difference between widows and orphans, just remember to avoid visually incomplete type at the tops and bottoms of legs. As always, look. Train your eyes to spot visual awkwardness. Finally, number 13, justified rivers. Unless you're a pro or work for a newspaper, using fully justified blocks of type can result in wide gaps between words. This cuts down readability by producing visually distracting rivers of white space through and through your text. Fully justified type only works for a proper ratio of font point size to column width. You can drain justified rivers of negative space by increasing the width of your column, thus the length of your line of type, reducing the font size, or both. Our best recommendation on fully justified text: don't. Align your text flush left, ragged right instead. Problem solved. That covers all 13 offenses. Now go forth and sin no more. Don't forget to take the checklist with you. And this concludes the summary of Layout Sins PDF. Thank you for watching.